Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. The Army reopens the only road to Arsel after nighttime protests forced the closure of several major highways across the country. Parliament kicks off ministerial statement discussions before the MPs cast their vote of confidence for the newly formed cabinet. And Israeli air raids on Syria killed 1 soldier and injured 7, as the Syrian army warns the strikes endanger regional and security stability. The army has reopened the only road to the Bekaa Valley border town of Arsel, suspected of harboring Syrian rebels, after nighttime protests forced the closure of several major highways in Beirut, as well as East, North and South Lebanon, in support of the town. Residents from the neighboring town of Laboué had sealed off the main road out of Arsel with a sand barrier after 1 person was killed by rocket fire. The closure sparked protests in Ta'nail, Jdita and Saad Nail in the Bekaa Valley, blocking major highways with burning tires. Similar protests also saw the closures of the Beirut thoroughfares of Corniche el-Mazraa, Kola and Us, as well as the coastal highway connecting the capital to the south and key roads in the northern Akkar region. Sources say a young man died after he was seriously injured as the Lebanese army deployed in Us and fired live rounds in the air and shot tear gas and canisters to disperse the demonstration. 2 rockets from Syrian territories hit the eastern town of Hermel. Media reports say the 2 rockets have reportedly landed near the Hermel Public Hospital. No casualties were reported. A security meeting at the Mabda Palace orders ministries and security forces to intensify cooperation and take the necessary measures to restore calm in tense areas across Lebanon. President Michel Sleiman chaired a security meeting that tackled the security chaos in several areas in the country, mainly in the northern city of Tripoli and the Bekaa. The meeting was held in presence of Prime Minister Tamam Slam, ministers and high-ranking security figures. The attendees ordered security agencies and ministries to further enhance cooperation, take the necessary measures to restore calm in the areas witnessing tension and to maintain stability. Parliament has kicked off ministerial statement discussions that will last for 2 days before the MPs cast their vote of confidence for the newly formed cabinet. Prime Minister Tamam Slam says despite the exceptional circumstances due to security and economic concerns, and despite the difficult local and regional situation, the national interest needs to prevail. Salam emphasized his government's mandate, vision, mission and strategic objectives, pointing out that its priority is to fight terrorism and boost security forces' capabilities so that they can carry out this duty in addition to the duties at the border. He said the government also aims at speeding up the process of arming the Lebanese army through various sources of funding, particularly the Saudi grant. Salam said the government also seeks to create an appropriate atmosphere for the upcoming presidential elections and finalize the administrative decentralization project. He added that the government's mandate seeks to promote a positive climate for dialogue, as well as resume discussions on the controversial issue of a national defense strategy. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja says the party's executive body will meet to discuss whether to take part in national dialogue sessions called for by President Michel Sleiman. Lebanese Forces bloc MP Strida Jaja says her party will not give the newly formed cabinet of Tamam Slam the vote of confidence. Jaja also says the state should have the sole strategic, security and military authority and reiterates her party's call for controlling the border with Syria. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja says that resolving the security situation in the country should start by removing non-state weapons and calls on Hezbollah to surrender its arsenal to the Lebanese army. Israeli air raids on Syria kill 1 soldier and injure 7 as the Syrian army warns that the strikes endanger regional security and stability. The statement comes after Israel announces it has carried out air raids overnight against several Syrian army positions that aided and abetted an attack against Israeli troops on Tuesday. The strikes comes 12 hours after 4 soldiers who were patrolling the Israeli side of the ceasefire line with Syria were wounded by a roadside bomb, one of them severely. Syria states the Jewish state's strikes were intended to boost the morale of the opposition adding that the attack is an attempt to divert attention from the army's victories in Yabrud. Syria's army enters Al Husn in the central province of Homs and is fighting for control of the famed Crac des Chevaliers castle. A security official says the army entered Al Husn and took 2 districts of the village and is bombarding areas around the Crac des Chevaliers to take control of the castle. Crac des Chevaliers, built between 1142 and 1271 and considered one of the best preserved Crusader castles in existence, and has already sustained damage from previous fighting between rebels and regime forces during Syria's conflict. The army is also engaged in continuing clashes in the Kalamoun region along the border with Lebanon, where it captured the rebel bastion of Yabrud. 4-year-old Shahad is among hundreds of thousands of Syrian children suffering from the traumatic effects of the war in their country. After a bomb attack on her family home, she stopped speaking. Here's her story.
This is Shahad, an energetic little 4.5-year-old girl from Daraa in southwestern Syria. But she is also a very traumatized little girl. 2 years ago, a mortar exploded in front of her family's house there.
يعني يوم اجى على البرندة اللي شافوا قالوا اللي جوا ولا واحد بيطلع منهم عايش. بس رب العالمين حماني أنا وولادي، يعني كنت أنا وولادي بالبيت، حمانا رب العالمين. ما أصاب الناس شيء غير شهد.
Shahad went into shock. For 4 days, she had a fever. Then, when she got better, she stopped being able to use the bathroom. And worse, she stopped speaking. The family fled to Ramtha in northern Jordan. Once there, a child psychologist diagnosed her as suffering from trauma.
لأن إنه فترة يعني بتصيبها مثل فترة إنه ترجع للبيبي، يعني تفقد مرحلة من عمرها بترجع للبيبي. الناس بيجي سنة و8 أشهر من عالجها هون من يوم تجينا لهون. هسا وضعها الحمد لله أشوى شوي.
Shahad is progressing on her road to recovery. For the past 2 months, she has come every day to mingle with other children like her. The Jordanian Women's Union takes in Syrian children affected by the war.
كان المطلوب منهم انها تندمج مع اطفال من عمرها عشان تبلش تحكي او يعني تندمج مع الاطفال من عمرها. شهد ما كانت تقبل تترك امها نهائيا لانه هي امها الوحيده اللي بتفهم عليها ايش اللي بدها اياه.
The activities help children work through the fear and loneliness of the war. The counselors focus on Shahad's verbal communication.
انتي وين البيضة؟ شطورة، شو لونها؟ أصفر. أصفر.
Shahad is being more social, more open, even a little less fearful.
بطاطا. وأنت استني ما بنحكي لك بطاطا غير لما تحكيها صح. بطاطا. قولي بطاطا. بطاطا.
The hope is that she will be able to start school next year. Every step Shahad takes, every effort she makes, gets her a little closer to repairing what she lost, her voice, and a little part of her childhood.
Coming up next, Britain warns Russia could face permanent exclusion from the G8. Stay tuned for more after the break. Welcome back. At least 5 people have been killed during clashes between the Egyptian army and an armed group in Kalyubia province. Kill a brigadier general and a colonel. The exchange of gunfire erupted after the army officers tried to storm a safe house belonging to self-declared jihadist group Ansar Beit al-Maqdis in the Nile Delta region north of Cairo. The Interior Minister says a large quantity of explosives was found in the hideout, adding that the fighters had used explosive belts during the confrontation. The Interior Ministry states that the hideout near the Nile Delta town, Al-Qanatir al-Khairiyya, was used to make explosives. Attacks on security forces have spread to the capital and elsewhere in the Nile Delta. Moving on to Europe, Britain has warned President Vladimir Putin that Russia could face permanent exclusion from the G8 if the Kremlin took further steps against Ukraine. Prime Minister David Cameron told the British Parliament that the referendum in the Crimea is illegitimate and illegal and cannot be accepted by or legitimized by the international community. Russian troops, backed by unarmed volunteers, stormed Ukraine's naval headquarters in the Crimean port of Sevastopol and raised the Russian flag as Moscow tightened its control of the Black Sea Peninsula. The dramatic seizure came as Russia and the West dug in for a long confrontation over Moscow's annexation of Crimea, with the United States and Europe groping for ways to increase pressure on a defiant Russian President Vladimir Putin. Investigations into the mystery of a missing Malaysian jet appear to be at a deadlock, with no conclusive evidence of foul play. 11 days have passed since Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 went missing. 26 nations are still struggling to find the airliner over an area more than two-thirds the size of continental United States. Malaysian and U.S. officials believe the aircraft was deliberately diverted, but an exhaustive background search of the 239 passengers and crew aboard has not yielded any possible motive. Malaysia's top official in charge of the unprecedented operation says it is vital to reduce the scale of the search and renewed appeals for sensitive military data from its neighbors that Malaysia believes may shed light on where the airliner flew. And now for news around the world in brief. At least 7 people have been shot dead and 1 injured at a Turkish Statistics Institute office in the eastern province of Kars. State media says a former employee who was sacked was responsible for the attack. The individual shot himself after killing 6 people. Reports say it was an act of revenge by a disgruntled former employee who was deprived of severance benefits. Iran's nuclear program is being discussed in Austria's capital, Vienna, where Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is meeting representatives of 6 world powers for a last round of talks. They face an uphill struggle to iron out their differences. About 200 Taiwan students opposed to a trade pact with China, which they fear gives the mainland too much economic influence, have occupied Taiwan's legislature. Media says the protesters burst into the legislative chamber and repulsed police efforts to evict them. The students said they were demanding an apology to the Taiwan people from President Ma Ying-jeou for the trade pact, and that an initial review of the pact by the ruling KMT party be scrapped. The U.S. National Security Agency has created a surveillance system that is recording all the phone calls in an undisclosed foreign country, allowing it to play back any conversation up to 30 days later. There are unnamed sources with direct knowledge of the system, as well as documents supplied by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, who since last year has leaked extensive data revealing sweeping American spying activities. At the request of U.S. officials, the NSA is withholding details that could be used to identify the nation where the system is being used or where it might be used in the future. A classified summary of the system says the collection effort was recording every single conversation nationwide in the first target country, storing billions of conversations in a 30-day rolling buffer that clears out the oldest calls as new ones are made. No other disclosed NSA program captures a nation's telephone network in this entirety. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The Army reopens the only road to Arsel after nighttime protests forced the closure of several major highways across the country. Parliament kicks off ministerial statement discussions before the MPs cast their vote of confidence for the newly formed cabinet. And Israeli air raids on Syria kill 1 soldier and injure 7 as the Syrian army warns the strikes endanger regional security and stability. Those are midweek headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice evening.
وبحبر الحوار كتبنا